got my uniform, actually went to the board. That's all. There was no more prep. Just went to the board, and I think it was a sergeant major there asking questions. And I didn't even know I was supposed to be nervous. I just went, and he started asking questions, and I was like, I don't know. I didn't know the answer to any of the questions. He's like, did you study or prep for this at all? I was like, nope. Now, and I didn't even know that I was just humiliating myself.
Yeah.
Luckily, the new sergeant first class, who just came from being a drill sergeant, who was my new boss, had just arrived and watched me from the side. Now, I didn't know he was there. So we had a tense conversation after that. He wasn't looking for why I didn't know or what my excuses were. He didn't care. Like, that was humiliating, and, you can imagine that conversation. And he ended up being the guy that I exemplified for a long time. I ended up working directly for him for the next couple of years. He's the one who forced me to go to OCS. He kind of taught me what leadership was, either kind of indirectly, just
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Mediocre Dads. I'm your host, Quan. I go by Q, where being mediocre is a choice, and you have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. I am joined by a special guest who is Colonel Damon Wells, and it's weird for me. And I was telling this before we record, right? So I've never interviewed or spoken to a colonel outside of like the military, right? So being used to being in uniform, professional settings, and just kind of briefing the colonel, whatever the case might be, right? And so this is new for me, but it's exciting, it's exciting new. And I'm intrigued because, his wealth of knowledge and experience within the military is definitely going to be helpful for our conversation when we're talking about leadership, because we've talked about leadership before. We've talked about leadership in the church. We've talked about leadership just in general with Comfort and Chaos. But now to actually talk to a leader that's senior in the officer rank and has 28 years of experience to kind of give to us here with the is going to be an amazing experience, right? And so I don't take it for granted, guys. Don't sit here and think like, oh, just military jargon, military talk. Now, I promise you, the way he's going to articulate these things is going to be able to understand both civilian and military, and it's going to make sense for you guys. So that's the intent behind it today. But before we get too deep into it, I'm going to allow Colonel Damon Wells to introduce himself and kind of give you guys a brief little introduction about himself.
Thanks, Q. Hey, that was a great introduction. And so just quickly about myself. Right now, I'm at a joint headquarters called U.S. AFRICOM. It's Africa Command. So it's a big joint headquarters, meaning that it's Army, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, Air Force. It's all the services. It's a 4-star headquarters. There's a 4-star general that runs the headquarters, answers to the Secretary of Defense. So it's a fairly high level headquarters, responsible for the whole continent of Africa, all 53 of the 54 countries. Sorry, and so I've been here for about a year in Germany doing that. I got one more year to go. Before this, I was at Fort Carson. I was a brigade commander of the Division Artillery for 4th Infantry Division. I've been to Iraq a couple times. I've been to Afghanistan. I've been to the Baltics. I've been to Korea. I've been to multiple places throughout the U.S. And I'll tell you, for the last 25 of the 28, I think it's 29 now, years I've been in the Army. I've just been fascinated by the impact of leadership, the psychology of leadership, and, the human behavior part of leadership. And I think that the lessons you can pick up along the way, regardless of what industry you're in, whether it's military or corporate, apply across the board, because at the end of the day, it all boils down to human behavior, a little bit of psychology.
Yeah. And that is one of those things where it took me a while to learn of where everyone is different and everyone has a different upbringing, and this idea of what, one, being a leader is, but two, also being a subordinate and following leaders and following leadership, our leaders, right? Because I have tried this, I call it the Army approach of just kind of blanket leadership over the same type of style of leadership for everybody. and it never works. And I thought, like, because when I was coming up the ranks, I was like, that is what we're supposed to do. That's kind of what my NCOs did, and that's what my the officers in charge of me did. So like that's what it was supposed to be. But then I find out when I was put in that position in 2017 of having my very first soldier, I was like, oh no, like this doesn't work at all. Like this, I was like, I need a game plan for this. So I totally agree with you. Everyone is different, and the psychology of how people view leadership is it's amazing and amazes me. So for you, sir, personally, when you first started in the military, what was leadership like for you, right? Because I imagine you didn't enlist, you straight commissioned.
No, I was enlisted for about 3 years.
Okay, so what was that like, and then making that transition for you?
Yeah, so it took me a while to reflect back on that period to really understand it, because I just kind of took it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that worked was I enlisted when I was 23 years old. So I'd done a little bit of college, a little bit of this and that. I enlisted when I was a little older. My first duty station was Fort Carson, Colorado. And just a little story of the evolution of how all that happened, because that was my segue to go into officer candidate school.
Mm-hmm.
When I first got there, the unit that I was assigned to wasn't quite there yet. They were moving up from a different installation from Fort Bliss.
Okay.
So when I got there wasn't a lot of people. There was no equipment. There was really no office space. Like we were doing the typical Army thing of go around and find all the leftover furniture and just, kind of put together your office spaces. So that was my first impression of the Army. And at the time, I was just glad to be there. I didn't care what it was. I was going to mow grass, do whatever they told me to do. It didn't really matter. And so leadership was a bit scarce. So I had a sergeant, an E5, who was my immediate supervisor, who was just not very good, not a great leader. Not super motivated, didn't really care about being a leader. And again, I didn't know any better, so it just was what it was. And we started having little weekly meetings, and in one of the meetings, that sergeant said, "Hey, we need somebody to go to this. We're doing a soldier of the quarter board. I need somebody to go. Hey, Wells, you're pretty smart. Why don't you go to this?" And again, not knowing any better, of course, I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And so didn't hear about it. And you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So I didn't hear about it again until the day before. And he said, "Hey, don't forget your dress uniform. That board's tomorrow." Sure thing. Got it, Sergeant. So showed up, got my uniform, actually went to the board. That's all. There was no more prep. Just went to the board, and I think it was a sergeant major there asking questions. And I didn't even know I was supposed to be nervous. I just went, and he started asking questions, and I was like, I don't know. I didn't know the answer to any of the questions. He's like, "Did you study or prep for this at all?" I was like, "Nope." Now, and I didn't even know that I was just humiliating myself.
Yeah.
Luckily, the new sergeant first class, who just came from being a drill sergeant, who was my new boss, had just arrived and watched me from the side. Now, I didn't know he was there. So we had a tense conversation after that. He wasn't looking for why I didn't know or what my excuses were. He didn't care. Like, that was humiliating, and you can imagine that conversation. And he ended up being the guy that I exemplified for a long time. I ended up working directly for him for the next couple of years. He's the one who forced me to go to OCS. He kind of taught me what leadership was, either kind of indirectly, just by the way he engaged with me and taught me and the other young soldier that was there with me. He just taught us stuff, taught us about leadership. So that made a huge impact, and it didn't take very long, a few years before I kind of looked back and I was like, man, he's responsible for me being the way I am, and in a very positive way. His name was Paul Mahoney. So that was kind of my enlisted time. And he's the one because back then you had to fill out paperwork by hand or on a typewriter. And the officer candidate school packet was one of those things, I was kind of interested in, but man, that was a lot of typing, and I had to find a typewriter. And he basically forced me to do all that. And because he was doing the right thing. It's uncomfortable, but you have potential. You need to do this, and you will do it. And again, it paid off. And like he is the reason I'm where I am today.
That's amazing. Because, when people hear, oh, he forced you, or they forced you to do that. And you're like, he goes, for lack of better terms, yeah, they did force you. But it was one of the best things that happened to you,
That's
because
right.
if they didn't force you, you wouldn't be where you are today. And I tell people all the time, like I was forced to make a decision to stay as a 42 alpha or go to become a 35 Lima. And they're like, what do you mean you were forced? So I was like, well, I could stay as a 42 alpha, which is human resources, doing paperwork, or I could become a 35 Lima, which is a lot, gives me a badge and credentialed, right? I'm a special agent, which cool with the titles, doesn't matter, but still doing something that fits more of who I am as a person, rather than just sitting in an office all day and just forcing myself to try to enjoy doing that. And it was this push that I was getting from one of my OICs. He goes, hey man, what's the worst thing that can happen? You do it and you don't like it. And he goes, oh no. All right. He goes, you can get out. I mean,
Right.
if that's the case. And I was like, yeah, I guess that's true, but I don't really understand. He was like, no. He goes, I don't care. Just do the paperwork. First, he goes, like, the first step is doing the paperwork. He goes, the second step is submitting it into seeing if you're even going to get accepted. He goes, because you could do all of this and not even get accepted. I was
Yeah,
like,
that's right.
I guess bring up a good point. And so I did it. And sure enough, I did get accepted, and here I am now. And it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. But like you said, it was, I was forced, in more or less, for lack of better terms, to do this thing, and it helped me. I remember in being in Afghanistan, and my mentor, amazing guy. He was a staff sergeant for before he commissioned. He went OCS as well, and I remember we're in Afghanistan. He's my OIC, and I'm trying to just learn from him. And learning from him meant he's not going to give you the answer. You know what I mean? Like I had to search for the answer before I came and asked the question, and if I asked the question, he was just going to he just looked at me and he'd be like, well, did you research the answer? I said, well, and the moment I said that, he'd stop talking. He'd stop engaging with me. He would look right now and he'd just go back to typing, and he'd be like, you can figure it out. And I'm like, and he would hand me this binder, and it had, all the answers I needed, right? And he would be like, go find it in there. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, right, yes, sir. So I'd research the answer, and then I would be able to get on my computer, and then I can Control F. I was not allowed to use Control F first. My first option was I need to look through the binder, print it out, and find the answer, read it, and then I can go on the computer, Control F, and then come back to him. And he always expected this. I would come back to him with the answer. And if I didn't come back, it would, towards the end of the day, he'd be like, he goes, don't you owe me something? I'm like, what do you mean, sir? He goes, don't you owe me an answer? I was like, oh, yeah, well, sir, yep. So I did get the answer. And he's like, cool. All right, cool. Just making sure you learn something. And I learned so much that way. In the beginning, it was hard. It was rough. I would complain. Yep. I would complain to my battle bed. It was like, man, I don't get it. Why is he doing this? Like, why is he making it harder? We have a job we need to do, blase, not understanding it. But the moment we left Afghanistan, and I went back to, I was working at Brigade Regimental S1 at 3CR at Fort Hood. And I was intermingling with my peers, and we were doing things. I found soldiers coming to ask what I would consider stupid questions at the time, because me being all prideful, I was like, I've had to figure this out. And they would come ask me, and I'm like, did you go do any research, or you just press the easy button? And I found myself mimicking him, not knowing it, just subconscious. Like, this is what I learned. And I learned so much from him subconsciously about leadership. It wasn't about him sitting me down, explaining me leadership. It was more about him, how he carried himself and what he did on a daily basis, that we watching and seeing was like, okay, that is what leadership looks like. That is what being a leader looks like, and how you carry yourself. And I emulated it, and I emulate it today a lot. And I appreciate him for it. But it was hard. It was rough. You know what I mean? Like, it was a hard thing to grasp, So for you, when you put on when you finally pin on the bar, and, I imagine you're going to go be a PL somewhere, what was that like? Were you like, hey, I'm prepared for this, I'm ready for this? Or was it, I'm nervous and I don't know if I'm ready to step into that role of what they expect me to do?
Yeah, first, what you just described, I think is fascinating, because it's It's the good intuitive leadership that forces you to do that, because if I just give you something to eat, you just eat it and you don't appreciate it. If I make you go pick the vegetables, grow the vegetables, do all that stuff, now I know how to feed myself.
Yeah.
And if you go, like, because I've done it too, right? I read the whole dash 10 on a stupid tractor, old 577. I knew everything about that thing. Whereas, most people don't. They want to get through the PMCS as quickly as possible, and they still don't know, like, how much oil does it hold and, like, all this stupid little facts. But
Yeah.
when you actually read the manuals, it's all in there.
Yeah.
But when my lieutenant time, I think it's kind of funny because, when you hear someone goes to OCS, okay, you were enlisted, and I stayed the same branch. I was field artillery when I was enlisted, and then I got selected for field artillery when I commissioned.
Oh, nice.
So you would assume, oh man, yeah, this is a pretty easy transition, but of course it wasn't. So my first duty station as a lieutenant was the 82nd Airborne.
Oh.
So yeah, I was nervous.
Yeah.
And it turns out that I didn't actually know all that much, especially didn't know all that much about leadership. So it took me that whole time to kind of get my feet, be able to, the non-commissioned officers there are just a different breed. So how to interact with those guys, that the fact that, yeah, I'm a second lieutenant, I'm in charge, but that sergeant first class over there knows infinitely more about what we're doing than I do. So it'd probably be smart to ask him, get his advice on all the things we do. So it was not a magical transition where being enlisted just gave me all this knowledge. It gave me a little bit, but at the end of the day, I still had a ton of learning to do. And frankly, I'm still learning 29 years later. So it was interesting times, though.
And that's the amazing part, is that we're still learning. I thought when I put on stripes, I was like, you know what? I have arrived. I have figured it out. I said I have experienced enough to be able to do what my mentor did to me, and lead in a way in which it's going to help and benefit all my soldiers. I leave Fort Hood and I go to Fort Huachuca. And I'm from Arizona, and everybody says, like, oh, you're going to Fort Huachuca. You're like going to Fort Huachuca. Where's that at? I was like, apparently it's in Arizona. And I was like, I've never heard of this place before. And I'm from Arizona. And I was like, I don't know where it's at. So I looked it up on a map, and I was like, oh, south of Tucson. I was like, I guess, so anyway, I arrived at Fort Huachuca, and, like I said, newly promoted sergeant, ready to just kind of hit the ground running. And I'm in processing, and they're like, oh, you're the new S1 NCO. I said, yeah, I am. How do you know that? And they're like, oh, well, we've been expecting you. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but all right, cool. And every office I went to kind of was doing in processing, they all told me about who my first soldier was going to be. And I was like, okay, all right. I said, I'm taking that in. I said, I appreciate, you telling me these things. I said, however, I like to give every soldier a chance, an opportunity, because I said, if you go to my last unit, you might hear some things about me that you would be concerned about, be like, I don't know if this guy's really, who he says he is. So I was like, I want to give this soldier an opportunity to succeed. And I think maybe I can impact her in a positive way that will allow her to be successful as well. And they're like, yeah, cool. You got it. And they're all kind of giving me just this, like, all right, you say that now, good luck type of thing. The first month was great. The first month was great. I'm talking like, I was like, man, I am hitting every stride. This is great. The second, the third, and the fourth month really enlightened me to what people were trying to tell me. And it doesn't mean that they were right. It just means that I was not prepared for the pushback that I was going to get. And I was dealing with a soldier who was older than me. I was newly promoted sergeant at 22 years old, and she had been in the Army for 8 years and was a specialist, and she was 27. And so immediately, right, there's this, it's jealousy and just disdain because I'm the 22-year-old sergeant, thinking I got it all figured out, and she's the 27-year-old who's like, I've been in the Army for 8 years, and you've been in here for 4, and you think you got it all figured out, and you think you're better because you got promoted. And truthfully, part of me did. And so I'm trying to teach her things or be like, hey, this is what you can do. But she has more experience than me. She has more knowledge than me on the job. She knows more about the Army and how the inner workings of the Army works. And I'm over here trying to lead her in a way in which I thought that's how you were supposed to lead. And one thing led to another, to next thing I know, we're sitting in with the commander and the first sergeant at her second reading for her Article 15. And I'm just thinking to myself as I'm sitting there in this room, like, how did we get here? How did I get here? I was like, I wanted this. I wanted to take this soldier and change the perspective, the views of this soldier that everybody had of her. But everything I did, everything she did, it got us to this exact point where I'm just like, I suck at this leadership thing. I really genuinely suck at this leadership thing. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing at all. And it was really just one of the pivotal moments in my life where I was like, I went home and I sat there and I tried to think of like, how do I become a better leader? I was like, what do I do? What am I doing wrong? I couldn't figure it out. And part of me still doesn't know the entire answer, but it was one of those moments where I was just like, oh, I don't know where I went wrong. I was like, I tried the gentle approach. I tried the semi-aggressive approach. I tried the almost the drill sergeant approach, and none of them worked. I can never reach this soldier, and I didn't understand why. I was like, I don't get it. I was like, I'm doing all the things that, that were kind of taught to me. And I was like, I just came from Fort Hood. I had FORSCOM I deployed out of FORSCOM, and where I'm at TRADOC. So like, this should be easy. And it was not. And I couldn't figure it out, and it bothered me for years. Because I couldn't reach a soldier, and it hurt me so bad because I was like, I just wanted to be great at this leadership thing. So for you, did you ever have a moment where you were just like, I don't know if I'm meant to do this. Like, I don't know if I'm meant to be in charge like everybody expects me to. Not to say you want to quit, but just be like, this is harder than I thought it was going to be, and I'm supposed to be in charge, and I can't tell you what we're doing, because I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
So, great question. That that uncertainty will come out every now and then. I think in all of us, right? It ties back to like I look for research or academics or paradigms of leadership. Try to look for as many as I can that I can apply to leadership to help me understand what's going on in leadership. Because there's hundreds of definitions of leadership. There's books. There's all kinds of information, which sort of implies that it's easy to figure out because anybody can write a book about it. But what it really means is that there's no set way to do it. Like we said at the beginning, everybody's different. It's about personality styles. It's about psychology. It's about human behavior. So the first thing I would go to is personality styles. And I like to use the 5-factor personality model, 5-factor assessment. And you get, it's important to understand, first of all, important to understand your own personality style, because that's definitely going to affect how people perceive your leadership style. And it will point out to you things that you need to be aware of about your leadership style. For example, the easy one is the extroversion scale. If you score very low in extroversion, meaning that you're an introvert, you're going to have a hard time exhibiting leadership behaviors that resonate with people because you have a hard time interacting with people. It's a stressful thing to interact with people. So for a leader to understand that about themselves, what it indicates is that I've got to practice doing extrovert behaviors, not being an extrovert, just coming across as an extrovert to the team, because generally extrovert behaviors are perceived by a team as leadership behaviors. Like they correlate, right? Mm-hmm. The more extroverted people get interpreted as leaders, whether or not they are, they get interpreted, their behaviors get interpreted as leadership. So that's one. It's important to know that about yourself. If you've got an introverted person on your team, then they're going to have a hard time engaging with you. So what we immediately do is we start to try to figure out why won't they interact with me? Oh, they don't like me, or they're in a bad mood today, or whatever. And it could just be that that's their personality style. So you've got to spend some time building a relationship with that person before they will truly start to engage with you. So important stuff to understand. Another one I like to point out is agreeableness, right? A very agreeable person will just want to do the things you want to do. Like that's what makes them happy. It seems counterintuitive if you're not one of those people, but I know people like that. And it's always what do you want for dinner? Well, I don't care. And just whatever I pick is the perfect idea. And it would seem like, don't you want to have a say in this? And they literally don't. They get pleasure from doing the thing that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to the opposite scale, very low in agreeableness, they're only going to do what they want to do. And they don't care what you want to do, right? So you've got these different types of people on your team. And if you've got a team full of people that are high in agreeableness, who only want to do the thing that somebody else wants to do, they're going to have a hard time making a decision or coming up with a plan, because they're always looking for more input, because somebody else might want to do something that I would really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're all low in agreeableness, then they only want to do, and you've seen these people, right?
Yeah.
Then they only want to do the thing their idea is the only idea they will accept. So I don't know the particulars about that one soldier, but I do understand, like in the cycle of team building, I have the P4 model, focus on the people, build trust, focus on the partnerships, build cohesion, focus on the practice of what you do to build confidence, and then ultimately you're building purpose, right? But it's a cyclical process, and everybody doesn't get to transition all the way through the cycle. There are some people who are outliers.
Mm-hmm.
So if my goal in the first phase is I need to build trust between me and each individual, and collectively within the team, and between each person in the team, not everybody will get there. So you have to decide as a leader, okay, what is my threshold? That person over there, I can tell for some reason doesn't trust us. Is it okay to move on? Are they going to catch up later? Or is there something toxic about that individual that potentially will lead to them ruining the team, or breaking, or prohibiting us from cohesion, preventing the cohesion, or something negative down the road, in which case that person has to go. Like, there's a lot of factors that play into this, but there's some times where as a leader, that person is just not the right person for your team, and they have to go. And it sounds like you had one of those people.
Yes, I have. I can say I have that now. So I'm the platoon sergeant for the CI platoon, and I am one of 6 staff sergeants I have within my one platoon, and it's crazy to think to have 6 staff sergeants in a platoon. Yeah. And I'm the platoon sergeant, and they have the soldiers under their team, or whatever the case might be. And it's difficult because the staff sergeant have their idea of what real leadership looks like. And so I have a few of them who could be agreeable, but would much rather be on the scale that you mentioned, the non-agreeable, and it turns into constant friction within the team, because it forces soldiers almost have to pick a side of, like, well, I like Sergeant Wilcox, and I don't mind how he leads us, versus, oh, I like Sergeant such and such, and I don't mind how they lead. So I'm picking sides, and it's splitting the office. And I tell them all the time, I said, listen, guys, look, we don't need to be best friends. I said, the Army doesn't require me to be friends with anybody. I said, but if I make friends along the way, I'm super excited about it. But I said, that being said, we have a job, we have a mission, and we have as non-commissioned officers, we have a level of expectations for ourselves. So we have soldiers who expect things for us, and we need to be here for them, not for us. And if we can learn that lesson as early on as possible, to remember what it was like to be in their shoes, where you didn't know anything, you didn't know what was going on, you wish you knew what was going on. And, you wanted, like you mentioned, trust. You want to trust your leaders, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know what that looks like. And it doesn't seem like they trust me, so like there's all these things going on where sometimes, like I mentioned earlier on, it seems like everybody likes the easy button. Well, go be a leader. there's so many facets to that. You can't just show up and
Mhm.
then you're like, hey, I'm in charge now. So I guess everybody knows what that means. I know what that means myself, and everyone's just gonna fall in line. No, there's just too many. There's too many factors in there that you have to take in consideration when you become a leader, especially in whether it's a platoon, whether it's a company, whether it's a battalion, brigade, right? All these different levels, echelons. There's so many key factors you have to take in consideration. And so I struggle with that because part of me wanted to, one of the options I had, and I talked to my OIC about was like, I was like, well, what does it look like, removing some of the excess, if you will, from the platoon? I said, it's not to say, hey, it's the opportunity for me to get rid of everybody I don't like, but it's an opportunity, one, to maybe put them in a place where they can thrive, on such as on staff, right? Because as NCOs we progress, we need to be on staff, even though we like to run away from staff. We need to sit on staff positions to understand how the dichotomy of how, what the battalion or the brigade are doing and why they're doing it. So then when it gets to the platoon level, you have a bigger and better understanding of what the bigger picture looks like. And so I was like, hey, so this is my recommendation. And we're kind of making some of those moves now. And it's going to benefit us in the long run, only because, like I said, the platoon is now going to be able to have that cohesion that we're looking for versus constant, push and pull, and I don't like you, and I'm going to get this, and we're going to do this, or whatever the case might be. So I definitely appreciate that. So I did want to dive into the 4Ps and how that came about for you. Was that something that you read about? Was that something like an idea that you sat down one day and you're like, this is really good. How do I put this into practice? How did that come about for you?
Yeah, so I don't even know how many years I've had it, for quite a few. And I think I generated it, before battalion command, before brigade command, they send you to a pre-command course.
Mm-hmm.
And they tell you to do things like come up with your leadership vision and leadership philosophy, command philosophy. And, there's other stuff, but they make you think about this stuff, which sounds kind of corny at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes you sit down and come up with an architecture for what you want your leadership style to be. So it started there. So it's just kind of introspective on, you have to think back. Which leaders did I like? What did they do that made me feel like I wanted to be part of their team? Because there's some leaders, and this, that okay, I'll do basically anything that person says. And there's some that you're like, well, I'll do what he says because I have to, but I'm not going to go out of my way to do extra. It's just, it's just some leaders really make us want to succeed. And some just, we kind of just feel like they're filling the role.
Yeah.
So that sort of retrospective look at leaders that made me feel good about being on the team was the start point. And I would look back on teams that I liked and I said, okay, what was it about that specific team that made me like that team? It always boils down to the people on the team.
Yes.
Like none of it was, what did we do? What did we deploy together? What kind of equipment did we have? It was never any of that. In fact, most of it was less than ideal circumstances, even to the point of not having the right equipment. But none of that mattered because I really got along with the people I knew. And this is where trust and cohesion comes in. But I knew they were going to do their absolute best to make this unit succeed, which made me want to do my absolute best to make the unit succeed. And I think that starts with I have this, starting level of trust that I have every faith that guy is always going to do the best thing for the team. And if it comes down to it, he's going to do the best thing for me. And what a great feeling to see your leader like that. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then interactions and just feeling like, I'm proud to say I'm on this team. Because in the Army, you get on teams where, for whatever reason, the atmosphere or the rumors about the team is like, oh, you had to go there.
Yeah.
It's just, and it's rarely true because things are always changing. But to be proud of the team I'm on, because I know this team produces great results, and it produces great results because, on a very simple level, we like each other and we want to work hard to make the team better. And I like them so much that we can compete together and we're going to have fun seeing who can do the best. So that's the cohesion right now. I feel like, man, that's my brother. I've got his back. He's got my back. And then you get you in the beginning of that model, it's kind of hierarchical where it's all good, but you have a leader, and we'll do some good stuff, and then we'll go back to the leader and figure out what we do next.
Mm.
As you evolve, people know what to do because that's been ingrained in the people, and they're really clear on what their role is and how they contribute to the team. I'm also clear on what your role is, and if you're not there, hey, we know, okay, we got to do that role too. Not a problem. We can all do it, but we have to because we want the team to succeed, and we're not going to let something get in the way of team success. We're not going to make an excuse. Well, Q didn't show up today, so we're not going to be able to do all that well. Not going to happen. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And then to the point where the vision, the mission of the team is so clear that now the leader, and it's sort of paradoxical, but now the leader doesn't have much of a role because you have emergent leaders all throughout the formation that will make sure all the stuff happens. All the leader has to do is kind of look, get a feel for the team, figure out what's the next problem. I can look down the road now because I know whatever we're doing now it's just going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Look down the road. What's the next big thing this team needs to do? And start planting the seeds. Hey guys, we should look down the road 6 months. We could do this big thing, and they'll just run with it. And I've been on teams like that. Frankly, I've been on teams like that as the leader or the commander. And it should be it's the pinnacle. It's the paradigm that every team should shoot for because it feels great. And frankly, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like you're helping out people that you actually care about.
Yeah, that's one of the best feelings where you're going when you show up, knowing whether you're one of the doers or you're the leader in that case, and you're just like you're overseeing, make sure everybody's on their P's and Q's doing what they're supposed to. But from either side, right, it's such a great feeling just to be able to show up and be like, I'm happy to be here. I don't hate being here. The experience is a positive one. I love the people I work with. We have a good working relationship. We have fun. We're able to get everything done. I can trust the person on my left or my right to do what they need to do, and they can trust for me to do what I need to do. And even if I happen to slip up, they're there to pick me up and make sure I can follow through and continue on mission, and vice versa. So I think that's I've been in one one team like that, and I have searched for that ever since because it is such a, like I said, you mentioned it's not even like it's not going to work. It's I'm happy to be here. Like there's no other place that I would rather be than right here with these people standing in formation at 06:30 in the morning, laughing and joking. And then First Sergeant says, fall in. And we're like, oh, are you? Hey, everybody, tighten up. You know what I mean? Like it's just, it's one of those things where you're having a good time, and every moment it's not positive, but you only remember the good moments over the bad moments you had. And that just creates this I will say it's heartbreaking because you think like, okay, this is what true Army units are supposed to be like. And then you PCS and you're just like, this is nothing like what I used to have. Like I know what good is. Like like I've seen good before. So it's craziness. But now me being a leader in the role that I am in, I'm trying to create that. And there's many different ways I'm trying to do that. And trying to say like, okay, because I understand one idea and one thing I might do might work for a few of them, because I'm in charge of 24, 25 soldiers. So it's like one idea might work, but then truthfully, that might only work for 5 of the soldiers, right? So then I need to do this, implement this idea, and this might get more of the soldiers on board, and whatever the case might be. So totally, it's a learning thing. It's a learning thing, and I love the learning that comes with it, with being a leader, because you're always learning something new. When you always thought, especially when you thought I figured most of it out. When you're like, no, I haven't figured it out. Especially when you step into that next role. So for you, has that leadership? I mean, obviously it changes, right? From when you're becoming from a PL to a commander, to a battalion commander, to a brigade commander, and so on and so forth, right? How has that role as a leader for you changed, and in being able to impact the subordinates underneath you?
Yeah, it's essentially what you're describing is it's kind of a roadmap, right? And every unit you go to has a different roadmap. And in some units, in the few that are great, you're like, this roadmap is really easy to follow. It got me right to where I wanted to go. And you go to other units and you're like, you get a napkin with some, lipstick stains and cigarette burn. You're like, I don't know how to follow this roadmap. But to me, I had the same experience you did. And because I'm an officer, I'm like, man, I have to recreate that. So I have to break that down to the parts that I can understand to try to recreate that unit. But as you progress through your career, you get iterative chances to practice that stuff, right? So you get a chance to employ your leadership skills and see how they work. And then you know how it works. We'll go to a unit for a little while, then we'll go to a school, and then we may talk about leadership. But to me, that was always the time to process that last experience. And I for whatever reason, we kind of run through all the scenarios in my head and let that information consolidate. And because I love thinking about leadership, I've got a pack of like 30 something PowerPoint slides where I kind of draw these models out of what I think I was observing. And then you go to another unit and you're on the staff and you observe the commander and you try to figure the commander out. How can I solve the commander's problems? How can I get ahead of the commander's thinking cycle? So you have to understand that personality because they're all different. So you have to understand that specific person. What does this person want from me? What does this person want the unit to be? And get ahead of that decision cycle so you can put something down they didn't even ask for and say, this is what you were going to ask me for, a couple weeks, or an idea they had that you know them so well, you can clearly articulate a rough idea they gave to you in some kind of detail. Like that's kind of what you're shooting for. But every command opportunity you get, you learn and you grow. And I could remember thinking that there was some stoicism and there's this I guess machismo is the wrong word, but you wanted to present as that leader that's very very dominating. So to me, that's what leadership was for a little while. And then I started to do that introspection. I'm like, you know what? I don't respond really well to those guys. I respond to the guys that seem like they care and they communicate very clearly. And it's very easy to understand what they want and how they think because they're very consistent in what they ask for. So that started to model my behavior. And I actually found the people like that, or worse, the people that are hard to figure out because they're not consistent in the way they engage with the staff, or they're not consistent in the things they ask for. It changes a lot. Those are the people that are hard to work for because you never know what specifically do they want from me. Even when they're clear about it, when you give it to them, that it's not quite what they wanted. So I was always very cognizant of, not only showing what your leadership philosophy is, what your vision for the unit is, reiterating that stuff as many times as possible. And then when you engage with people, think about the way you're engaging with people and be consistent. Like if my team knew I was a certain way, if they bring me something, I'm going to want to make it bigger. So they just brought me the first time around. I want it to be complex. So because I'm field artillery, we have to employ a lot of resources. So start with every resource you can find, and then we'll work our way down from there. Don't bring me we're going to do one and ask me to make you add more to it. Just little things like that. So being consistent, understanding when you engage, when you communicate, if your team can figure you out pretty quickly, it makes their lives much easier. Because if they don't understand what your reaction is going to be when they come in and talk to you, their stress just automatically goes up. And there's a lot of neurotransmitter stuff involved in leadership. You were describing that great team you were on. You were getting huge dopamine hits all day because it felt great, right? When you talk to people, you're getting huge serotonin hits because you're bonding with people. And that imprints in your brain. If you're on a team you don't like, or you're having trouble communicating, or you don't understand what your boss wants, every time you have to communicate with your boss, you get a cortisol shot. Your stress hormones go up. And again, that imprints. So now your impression of the unit is negative because my hormones are kind of telling my brain how to feel. So we hit personality, we hit the P4 model, we hit neurotransmitters. You can see how I like to parse out leadership. What really is leadership? It's a lot of things.
It is, and that's the amazing thing that I have in the end when I talk about leadership, whether it's within I'm doing an NCOPD or we're doing an LPD or whatever the case might be, it always comes back to it. And I'm like, and I try to explain to people, it's like there's so many things, in within leadership. You can't just say, hey, go be a leader, right? Because that means something different to everybody else, to someone, each to that own individual. And also, like, there's so much more we can explain and get in the details and the nitty gritty of what being a leader is, because ultimately when I say, hey, soldier such and such has the potential to go to the board and be a leader, right? And become, whether that's pinning on stripes or whether that's getting a rock or becoming a staff sergeant, right? It's like, okay, I see the potential in them. They have the potential themselves, right? But like, what type of leader are they going to be? Because I see them as they are now, but when they put on those stripes, or when they get that rock or become a staff sergeant, right? Things are going to change for them. And whether they want to acknowledge that or not, things are going to change, because they're going to be seen differently, and they're going to be expected to do things differently than what they were doing previously. And so it's kind of like, a lot of them, unfortunately, even myself included, I was one of them, was like, okay, well, things are going to be the same. When I went from sergeant to staff sergeant, I was like, well, things are going to be the same. I just might have a few more responsibilities, but ultimately things are going to be the same. And that wasn't the case at all. My whole life in a lot of ways changed. And so then for these soldiers, and that I, when they're going to the board and want to get promoted and all that, I'm like, you have to try to prepare for that change as much as possible, because it's too easy when you go to the board and they say, hey, how does the Army define leadership? And then you spit out the answer, how Army defines leadership. And then they say, well, how do you define leadership? And you're just like, Sergeant Major, and, you know what I mean? You're just kind of getting that lost look of like, I gave you the answer, how the Army defines it, because that's all you're going to ask me. That's how you look at it. But then they're like, no, how do you define leadership? Like, what does leadership look like for you? And you get stuck, because you're like, well, I've never really been asked that question until now. I don't know what that looks like for me. And so it's amazing, because I'm like, I tell them, like, hey guys, it's a crawl, walk, run type of thing, right? And a lot of people think I'm in the running phase. I said, nah, man, I just started walking. You know what I mean? I just started walking, where I'm in that phase where I'm like, okay, I have an understanding of a lot of things, but I'm still trying to hone in on what type of leader I want to be, especially as I choose to progress, whether that become a warrant or stay as an NCO, right? Because that leadership style has to be different. Things change, and even for yourself, right? When you went from enlisted to becoming an officer, there was a big change, and you couldn't do, or you were expected to be Lieutenant Wells versus, say, Specialist Wells or Sergeant Wells. Like, there was a different dichotomy. You were expected to know and do different things. And so that through those progressions, you learn a lot of these things, but still it takes time. And a lot of people don't want to put in the time to actually say, hey, all right, I'm still learning. It's okay for me to still be learning, but I also have expectations of me, and I need to implement a lot of these things the best way I can as possible, right? Because at the end of the day, I believe we're all trying our best, whether it's good or bad. I think we're all trying our best, and we have to try to figure out what works for us.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw another concept at you. So this is a leadership theory called implicit leadership theory, ILT. And all it is everybody's got their own sort of concept of what leadership is. They probably can't articulate it, but that's why when you see certain leaders, you say, well, I don't like this. I don't think this person's a good leader. It's hard to articulate, but we all have this sort of inbuilt sort of paradigm of what we think a leader is, right? And so when you get asked, and I hated doing it, but I used to start every LPD I did with, what do you guys think leadership is, right? Because you need to articulate it. You need to discover what you think leadership is, Because if you think your leader's not good, you may just have the wrong definition of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you may not know. And part of my argument is because I see a lot of not military, but just general leadership surveys, and most people don't rate their leaders very high. Like 50 to 70% think their leaders are ineffective. And my question is, well, by what definition? How do they know? Leadership's hard to figure out. So what makes them the expert on leadership? This is an interesting point, because we all have some sort of concept of what leadership is, but it may not be right. It may not be the right definition for the situation you're in, or for the one thing your leader did that make you not like them, or just all kinds of variables in that, right? And when you're young, it's important to try to figure that out. What do you think leadership is? Not necessarily for you, but kind of. But because you're going to grade all your leaders against this concept of what you think leadership is. And so you need to really clarify that and understand as much as you can what the rest of the world thinks leadership is, and make sure that your definition is good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're young, you're right. You say, well, I'm a leader now. I've pinned on that bar. I'm now the platoon leader. Guess I'm in charge. And so you kind of fake it, and you just do your best, and you learn along the way. And like when I was a battalion commander, I would make all the second lieutenants who are brand new. Normally we just get them, we do some kind of quick reception, and we throw them down, and hey, you're in charge now. Good luck. What I would do was bring them in, and they would shadow me for 4 days. Like, stay in my office. I give them some stuff to read. Every meeting I went to, they went to. Whether it was with the brigade commander or it was a command of staff at the battalion level, and I would sit down with the products and I would say, look, none of this means anything to you, but I'm going to focus in on this statistic right here, and let me tell you why. And then I would kind of give them the rundown on that. Every time the operations officer would come in and have a problem, they'd hear the conversation. They would sit through Article 15s in my office, and I would explain in as much detail as they wanted everything that was going on, so that when they went down to the platoon, they know, hey, at the battalion leadership, it's not a bunch of, because you know how it is. Like, battalion's giving us weird crap to do that doesn't make sense. Like, no, we're doing the best we can, just like you will. Mm-hmm. And that, frankly, it happens at every echelon. It happens at a 4-star headquarters too. But young folks need perspective, right? They need to get exposure to as much leadership theory and leadership practice as possible, because they are building their leadership theory about themselves and about what leadership truly looks like. And you always have this sort of eureka moment when you get a good leader and you're like, man, that leader makes me feel great. Because you have some that are intimidating, or insist on asserting dominance, or just aren't that engaging, or hard to figure out. They don't do much for you. You'll do what they say. But when you get that leader that's like, yes, I want to be like that. I'll do whatever that person tells me to do. That's sort of a eureka moment that you will now start to redefine the way you see leadership, because you have a model. You have facets and aspects you can kind of pick apart and say, I'm going to put that in my tool bag. I'm going to put that in my tool bag. And when you're young, it's important because you have to lead sort of by step-by-step instructions. That's why the military has leadership manuals. It's like, here's the behaviors, here's the leadership competencies, here's the leadership attributes. I don't know that it's all that effective, because it's hard to internalize that stuff from a book. It's got to be something you learn. It's just behaviors, and you could do something that's in a book, but somebody that you're actually trying to employ that technique on is not responding. You got nowhere to go at that point.
Yeah. And that is so true, right? We have these manuals, and they say, hey, this is what the Army says that how to lead, or what leadership looks like, or this is what the Army says about A, B, C, D, whatever it is, right? But then when you try to actually implement that technique, or that technique, you're like, I don't understand why they're not receptacle to this. Like, this is what the book tells me to do, and I'm doing what the book tells me to do, and it's not working. and you start to realize that a lot of these things are just built over time through your experiences, and your experiences help you to be able to navigate the difficult situations and difficult times, and even the good times and the the good situations that you're in, right? They teach you that, they show you like, oh, okay, I've been a part of a meeting like this where, it doesn't seem like everyone's on the same page. Okay, so like, how can I help to get us back on the same page and get us on track and be on this, the same sheet of music? It's like, okay, cool. I saw how this leader did it this way when I was sitting in that room, and I remember commanding staff, and I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't know what he just did, but it was like a magic trick, like he pulled a bunny out of the hat, and then all of a sudden, everyone in the room is just like, yeah, man, that's a genius idea. Yeah, cool. We're on the, you know what I mean? It was just like that person did magic, and so those experiences have helped me kind of be able to be like, okay, cool, I can employ this moment because I've seen it work, and now let me see if I can get it to work for me. And then I've worked the way I wanted it to. Okay, cool. I need to tweak it a little bit, but then you find yourself being able to do it again. And then your experiences grow to the point where when soldiers see you, when not even soldiers, right? Wherever you're working, whether you're a civilian or a soldier, you start to realize like, oh, okay, all right, no, I get this. I can do this. I'm seeing the ebbs and the flows. I'm seeing what this person is seeing, what this person is doing, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is where my role is. This is how I fit in this, and this is how I can make it work. This is how we can all come together, and I think I can employ this technique here, and this technique is going to work because I've done it before, and it's benefited everybody, and everybody now. It's crazy. You kind of look like a superstar, and you unintentionally didn't mean to look like a superstar, but they're like, hey, that guy knows what he's talking about. If we have an issue, go to him. Let's get him to figure out he's got it. And you're just like, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I heard this. I implemented the technique, and now you guys put a lot of pressure on me. But it's good pressure, so it's not nothing to fear. As we're coming to a close, sir, I wanted to ask you. So, you're married and you have kids, right?
I'm married, no kids.
No kids. Okay. So you've dealt with soldiers. You've dealt with soldiers, right? But being, at the pinnacle of which you are right now, right? How do you with that leadership, who you are when you're at work and when you come home, how do you turn that off, or is it kind of like you're always that same person regardless of what situation you're in?
No, I change based on the situation. I think leadership is very situation specific. Give me this group of people and they'll respond to something today. They may not respond to it tomorrow. So you're always in the process of scanning the environment, scanning the people, trying to figure people out. And I tend to be more of an introvert. So, but I've learned how to act like an extrovert. So I have to pretend to be an extrovert at work. So when I come home, I'm just like off.
Yeah.
As much as I can. So no, in some ways I'm the same. In some ways I'm different. The biggest one is I'm the introvert extrovert factor. I do like the thing that brings me the most satisfaction at work is solving very complex problems. If I can latch on to something like that at work, then work is pretty fulfilling to me. And where I'm at now, it's a matter of pulling disparate people in who don't work for me, but have some interest in solving this problem and working through the details and then trying to implement whatever complicated solution we came up with. So that trait, that's sort of openness and creativity. I'm definitely like that at home too. I do enjoy doing that stuff, which explains right now I'm playing around with how to make videos and how to make infographics and building websites, and just because it's fun. But I have the same interest at work. I do as much leadership development. It's a small team up at the chief of staff's office, but leadership development, I really have a passion about. Clearly, I'll do that in my off time. I love talking about leadership. So that's the same. So yeah, I guess the biggest difference between my work self and my home self is how much I talk. And
Yeah.
it tends to go way down when I'm at home.
Yeah, man, I would never guess you were the introvert, knowing how to do the extrovert things. I am a huge extrovert. I love talking. So I tell people all the time, one of the reasons why I started a podcast was because I love talking and just hearing from
Yeah, I
other
was going
people.
to say that.
Yeah, like it's just
it's
huge,
a good attribute. Yeah.
yeah. I love for for the longest time I didn't like that part about myself. I was like, man, I talk too much, or I'm in I'm just too much out there, and I didn't like it because it seemed to be I would push a lot of people away. And then as I got older and I started realizing, okay, hold on, this is who I am. I need to kind of you know be comfortable with who I am, but also be able to pay attention to. I tell soldiers all the time, time and place. I said, time and place, man. Listen, if we're out, we're at Top Golf as a platoon, and we're just having fun, and jokes. We're saying jokes. We mentioned how such and such golf swing is just absolute garbage. Should not be out here. Just sit down. We'll play for you. Know what I mean? It's really fun, right? We're having fun, but then when we go back to the office and we're working, and I'm back in platoon sergeant mode, and we're doing what we're doing. And the jokes of the golf swing comes up. It's like, hey man, look, I get it, it's funny, right? Time and place though, right? Time and place. Like, I'm all for jokes, I'm all for having fun, but time and place. It's amazing when I learned that, my life got a lot easier. And where I understood like who I am as a person and what my personality trait is, like where just because I like to talk, I was like, all right, knowing when to employ it at the right time and place and kind of feeding off the room, I was like, it will always be successful. And for me, in my who I am in my personality. So it's amazing, sir. Cause like I said, I never would have thought you were an introvert. I'm gonna be honest. I never would have thought,
Yeah.
Usually when I talk, when it comes to people who want to talk about leadership, I'm like, oh, those are the extrovert guys. They really like to be out there talking, and which is not a bad
you would
thing,
think, but I'll tell you, it's a passion, right? So my need to do that outweighs my need to be an introvert. So I just do what I got to do because I truly love it.
That's awesome. Well, hey, sir, before we get off here, if people want to find you, to learn more about you, to learn more about leadership, some of the things that you talk about, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, go to summaryleadership.com. All my links to all my other platforms are there, and the email contact information is on there too.
Awesome. So I'll put all of that in the description below, team. So if you guys out there and you really like what Colonel Wells has to say, and you want to learn more from him, go check out his website, Summer Leadership. I said this about all my guests, and I don't mean to just as a thing to say, but truly, guys, the people I talk to, when I talk to them, it's a great conversation. I enjoy talking to people and learning from them, and we can all learn from something from everybody. I have had this extraordinary opportunity to talk to several different people and learn so many different things that I never would have learned if I never had the opportunity to talk to different people. So I think it's amazing. I'm having a good time. I hope you all are enjoying as well. And sir, I hope you and wish you the best in your future endeavors. Whether that's going to retire here in the next year or so, or let's continue on and maybe even go for a star. Or are you gonna go for a star? Or are you like, maybe I'm good?
No, I think I got better plans.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's always amazing. I hear it when I'm talking to people, talking to the senior leaders. I'm like, oh, you're not gonna go for the CW5? I'm like, nah. I got some of the things I'm doing. I'm like, you're just like one step away, and it's amazing. I it's not to say you have to, but I think that's realizing like, hey, I came and I did what I was supposed to do. It doesn't mean it's not about progressing and getting that more rank. It's about I did what I needed to do. I've met that. Now I have something else I want to do, and I want to accomplish something else. And
that's exactly
forward.
right.
Yeah, and have my impact somewhere else. So that's amazing. Well, again, thank you for joining me, joining us on Mediocre Dads podcast, sir. Hey guys, I'm Q. I go by Quan, and remember, being mediocre is a choice. You have to refuse to be mediocre every single day. That's all I got for you guys. Until next time, Mediocre Dads out.
Thanks, Q.